The world stands divided between hope and despair. On one side, the news of Hamas agreeing to a ceasefire deal brings a flicker of relief. A small window that maybe, just maybe, the guns will fall silent. On the other side, doubt lingers like a shadow. How many times before have we seen such deals crumble, leaving behind only broken promises and more bloodshed? This is not just politics, it is survival. Every word in this agreement could mean life or death for thousands. The role of Egypt and Qatar is crucial. They have stepped into a battlefield of negotiations, trying to bridge the unbridgeable to calm a storm that has raged for generations. Egypt has historically carried the burden of mediating between Israel and Palestinian factions. And Qatar has become an influential player, often holding channels of communication open with groups others refuse to engage. Together, they present this ceasefire proposal as not just a political tool, but as a humanitarian necessity. They know that every passing day without a pause means more funerals, more displaced families, and more scars that will never heal. But diplomacy is never simple in this part of the world. Behind closed doors, negotiations are filled with suspicion. Each side questions the intentions of the other. Israel fears that a ceasefire might give Hamas time to reorganize, rebuild its strength, and prepare for the next round of conflict. Hamas fears that any agreement will be twisted to weaken them further while Gaza remains under siege. This constant push and pull makes peace a delicate glass, one wrong move, and it shatters. The streets tell a different story. In Israel, the families of hostages have turned into a powerful voice, demanding their government seize this opportunity. Their banners, their cries, their faces filled with anguish all echo one message: bring our people home. For them, politics is irrelevant. They do not care about conditions or strategies. Their hearts ache only for the safe return of their loved ones. And in Gaza, the ordinary people look at the sky with desperation, wondering if this time the planes will stop circling. If the children can finally sleep without nightmares. If the market stalls can reopen without the constant fear of death. This ceasefire is not just about silence of weapons. 'Tis about dignity. 'Tis about whether the people of Gaza can receive food, medicine, and clean water. It is about whether hospitals, many of them reduced to rubble, can receive aid. It is about whether Israel can feel some measure of security after months of chaos. And it is about whether the international community can finally say that it did something to stop the cycle of violence. But history makes everyone cautious. Every ceasefire agreement in Gaza over the last decades has been temporary. Some lasted weeks, some days, some only hours. Each time violence returned, often fiercer than before. And yet, even knowing this, the world clings to the hope of ceasefires. Because even temporary peace is better than endless bloodshed. Because even a few hours of calm can save lives. Because even a pause allows aid to enter, children to breathe, and families to reunite. Israel's hesitation is not surprising. For Israeli leaders, security remains the ultimate concern. They question whether Hamas will truly honor the deal, whether they will release hostages as part of the agreement, and whether Gaza will become a staging ground once more for future attacks. The government is under immense pressure, only from its people, but also from the international community, which is increasingly critical of the humanitarian cost of this war, balancing between the demand for military strength and the pressure. For peace is a political nightmare. Meanwhile, Hamas seeks to portray this acceptance as a victory of resilience. By agreeing to the deal, they signal to their people that they are not rejecting peace, but forcing the world to negotiate with them. They know that every ceasefire increases their political relevance. For them, it is not just about guns, but about legitimacy. The acceptance of this proposal is both a survival tactic and a propaganda tool, reminding the region that they remain central to any discussion about Gaza's future. The human cost, however, is beyond politics. The children of Gaza, who have grown up under siege, know more about war than they do about freedom. The mothers who have buried their children will carry wounds that no ceasefire can heal. The fathers, who have lost everything, still cling to the hope of rebuilding. In Israel, families torn apart by kidnappings live each day in torment, counting the minutes until they hear news about their loved ones. This is why the ceasefire matters. Not because it solves the conflict, but because it gives people a chance to survive. The international community watches closely. For nations far away, this conflict may seem like another headline, another story in the endless news cycle. But for those who care deeply, this ceasefire is a test of diplomacy, of humanity, whether the world can still come together to prevent total collapse in Gaza. The United Nations has pleaded for peace. Aid organizations have begged for safe corridors, and countless voices across the globe have cried out for justice. Yet cries do not stop wars, agreements do. And this agreement, fragile as it is all that stands between Gaza and more devastation. Imagine for a moment the scene in Gaza if this ceasefire takes effect. Streets once filled with smoke might briefly see the return of children playing. Aid trucks, long waiting at the borders, could finally enter with medicine, flour, and water. Families separated by chaos could try to find each other. For a few days, the air could be filled not with bombs, but with the sound of rebuilding. And in Israel, the families of hostages could hold their breath, waiting for the moment when their loved ones return. That moment of reunion, if it happens, would be priceless. A reminder of what peace is truly meant to protect. And yet, the doubt never goes away. The world has been here before, has witnessed the rise and fall of ceasefires again and again. Time, the same questions are asked. Will this one last? Will this bring a pathway to real dialogue? Or is it simply a pause before the storm returns? For now, no one has the answers. All that exists is a fragile hope. The truth is that peace in Gaza will never be simple. It is not just about Hamas and Israel. It is about decades of unresolved issues, about borders, about statehood, about security, about dignity. A ceasefire, no matter how important, cannot solve these problems. But what it can do is give space, give breath, give humanity a chance to be heard again. And sometimes, that is the most powerful beginning. This agreement, presented by Egypt and Qatar, symbolizes that even in the darkest times, diplomacy refuses to die. It shows that despite the bombs, despite the hatred, there are still efforts to find a middle ground. It proves that international actors are willing to shoulder responsibility to try and pull both sides away from the edge. It is a reminder that even fragile steps toward peace are better than endless marches toward war. For the people on the ground, for the mothers waiting for their children, for the families longing for their loved ones, this ceasefire is not about politics. It is about survival. It is about whether tomorrow will bring another funeral or another chance to live. And for the world, watching from afar, it is a lesson in how fragile peace can be, how precious it is, and how easily it can slip away. The coming days will decide everything. If Israel accepts, the world may see a temporary calm. If they reject, the violence will likely escalate once more. In either case, history will remember this moment as another chapter in the long, painful saga of Gaza. Whether it becomes a chapter of hope or despair remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The people who have suffered the most, the innocent, civilians, deserve far more than temporary peace. They deserve a future where ceasefires are not headlines, but history. Where children in Gaza and Israel alike can grow up without fear, without hatred, and without the sound of war shaping their lives. Until then, the world will keep watching, waiting, and praying that this time the ceasefire will hold. Because if it does, it could be the first small step toward something greater. And if it does not, the tragedy of Gaza will continue, as it always has, written in blood and tears, on a land that has seen too much of both.